Good evening. Begin with item 1, call to order. I call the March 8th, 2022 regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order at 7 p.m. We'll begin with item 1A, oath of office for new commissioners. Attorney Winter, will you please swear in new Commissioner Mary Homan?
Gladly. Ms. Homan, could I please ask you to raise your right hand and repeat after me?
I'm ready.
I, Mary Homan,
I, Mary Homan,
do solemnly swear that I will
do solemnly swear that I will
support the Constitution of the United States
support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of New Mexico,
and the Constitution and the laws of the state of New Mexico,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of the Office of Planning and Zoning Commissioner
of the Office of Planning and Zoning Commissioner
of the Village of Los Ranchos de Albuquerque
of the Village of Los Ranchos de Albuquerque
under penalty of New Mexico law.
under penalty of New Mexico law.
Congratulations and welcome home.
Thanks.
Welcome, Commissioner Homan. We'll now
Thank you.
move on to item 1B, roll call. Commissioner Christensen,
Present.
Commissioner Gay. He does not appear to be present, and I believe this is an excused absence. I spoke with Director Justice prior to the meeting. Commissioner Seavey is present. Commissioner Michelson,
Present, and congratulations, Commissioner Holman.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Smith,
Present, and welcome to Commissioner Elman.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barrow,
Present.
and Commissioner Homan.
I'm here.
Okay, let the record reflect that a quorum is present for the meeting. Moving on to item 1C, approval of the agenda. Director Justice, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda. However, I want to let anyone who is in attendance who's here for V22-03, a variance for 819 Charles Place. I want to let them know that that application has been withdrawn and will be heard tonight. It is not on the agenda, so there are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you, Director Justice. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So
I'll move approval.
Second,
Okay, Commissioner Homan has moved to approve the agenda and Commissioner Michelson has seconded. We'll begin with a roll call vote. Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Homan.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 2, public comment period. Residents may address the Planning and Zoning Commission to comment on issues, problems, or successes on topics that do not appear elsewhere on the agenda. Audience members will be given an opportunity to comment on agenda items as they come up. Speakers must register with village staff prior to the beginning of the meeting. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Kiko, do we have any members of the public signed up to speak?
I believe so. I will let them in. They may be trying to speak for an agenda item later, but if you wouldn't mind asking when I let them in.
Sounds good. Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Varos. Would you be able to unmute, please? If you can hear us, we see your name on the screen, but you are muted and your camera is off. So please unmute if you wish to speak.
Okay, could you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Before I ask for your name and address, are you here for the public comment period, or do you wish to speak on an agenda item this evening?
I'm commenting on, as a public comment. And
Okay.
I guess,
Before you
also-
continue, I'm sorry to interrupt. Will you please state your full name and address for the record?
yes, Camille Varos, 427 El Paraíso Road, Los Ranchos, New Mexico.
Thank you, Ms. Barros. Please go ahead, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tiffany, our PNZ director and commissioners. And congratulations, Mary, for your new appointment. Anyway, I'm not sure if this is considered. I spoke to Tiffany yesterday, and she said for my comments to be considered questions to, I guess, is that an applicant? Is that an agenda item? I guess I'm confused. So could you?
So Camille, commissioners, if you're planning on speaking on the townhouse development, that is an agenda item. So you're welcome to speak on anything else except for the townhouse development for this period right now.
Okay, well, I'll just make a comment. For any development going forward, I just hope that there's considerations for, our rising sun in the morning and our elevations to hopefully be kept at levels that's not going to block the residents in our neighborhoods view of our beautiful mountains, because that's part of our environment and part of our quality of life. So that's my only comment, and I'll wait to make comments on the agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment, Ms. Barros.
You're
Kiko, is there anybody else wishing to speak? If you are in attendance and wish to speak, you may use the raise hand tool that's in Zoom to indicate you'd like to speak.
There are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to item 3, the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Item 3A is the approval of the minutes from the January 11th, 2022 regular meeting. Are there any corrections or comments from the commissioners? Okay, well, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. I'll second.
Okay. Commissioner Barrow has moved to approve the minutes, and Commissioner Smith has seconded the motion. We'll now move on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Homan. You may be muted if you're trying to speak.
Yes,
so.
I'm sorry. I'll say yes, although I wasn't a commissioner obviously at that time, but I did attend the meeting. So from my recollection, they look accurate.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to item 4, public hearings and applications. Item 4A is Site Development Plan 21-02, a request by Nemagen Plaza LLC for a preliminary review and recommendation to the Board of Trustees of a residential site development plan for a development in the VC zone in the 4th Street character area. The property is located at 6502 4th Street Northwest and is legally known as Lot A, Blanche P. Doken subdivision of Lot 2 Merritt Acres, excluding the easterly 165.84 feet. School District 4, Bernalillo County, New Mexico, is filed in the office of the Bernalillo County Clerk on September 30th, 1937. The property contains 0.5016 acres more or less. Are there any commissioners who will recuse themselves from this item? Okay, I don't see any. Attorney Winter, would you please swear in Director Tiffany Justice?
Tiffany, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Justice, may we have the planning report?
Yes. So commissioners, you may recall this application before you last year in August. There was a sketch plat application for this. It's a proposed townhouse development on a formerly vacant lot, formerly the location of a gas station. In addition to the site development plan, the applicant is working on a major subdivision application. They're going to be replatting the property so that each house is on its own lot with a form of shared ownership or interest in the common areas. And that major subdivision will be before you in the future for yours and the board's approval. And so the action tonight is a recommendation either for approval or denial. And so with recommendation from the commission, this application will go before the Board of Trustees at their next month's meeting for the final decision. And so the surrounding area is zoned Village Center in the 4th Street character area, all the properties in the surrounding area. And there's two primary factors that we're going to be looking at. One is the zoning for the Village Center zone, the VC zone, and the other is the site development plan requirements. So first with the VC zone requirements, just going through how this application complies, the townhouses are permissive use and the dwelling unit density that is proposed with 12 units at half an acre is compliant with our requirement of 24 on an acre. The lot widths are compliant and will be confirmed with the subdivision plat. Since this property is in the Village Center project area and surrounded by non-residentially zoned properties, there's actually a minimum and a maximum setback for buildings on all sides. So the site plan complies with the setbacks on the east, west, and south sides, but not on the north. The north side setback is required to be 0 to 6 feet, but to do so would remove some community amenities. The setback requirements kind of assume that buildings are along the entirety of all of the property lines. And this could work for larger properties, but with this half acre, it's difficult to do that while also providing other amenities such as parking and landscaping and stormwater retention. So the setback requirement is met on 3 sides and is met as best as possible on that north side while still providing that extra amenity. The building height is compliant with 3 built stories and an overall building height of 45 feet from existing grade. Above that enclosed 3rd story is a stairwell, or sorry, is an enclosed stairwell and a roof deck that's enclosed with a solid wall. Since the stairwell serves to provide protected access to the roof, it is, and it's also still underneath that 48-foot height requirement. It still meets that requirement of being 3 stories and less than 48 feet. And the project meets our design requirements of 9.2.14E 3 and 4 with the building entrances along the setbacks from 4th Street or close to it, and the primary entries from sidewalks. There is 9.2.14E2 is met with windows, doors, and variations in the building facade to prevent blank walls. And 7 of the units face 4th Street, which requires at least 30% of the area of those buildings, that facade on 4th Street, to be glazing with clear glass. But this requirement is not really conducive to a residential use, and it's really better applied to a commercial use where goods or services are displayed with a storefront. And so since this use really is residential, this requirement is met as well as it could be with 16% of window glazing. No bicycle paths are proposed, so those standards aren't applicable. For pedestrian paths, sidewalks are included in and around the development, and these all are compliant. Another section of the VC zone design requirements, section 9.2.14E5B requires a continuous planter to separate the path from the street. But this sidewalk is already existing and installed by the village. And so adding a planter in addition to that is unnecessary. The design regulations of our typical design regulations section, section 9.2.21 aren't applicable to residential buildings within the village center zone. So the design of the buildings is technically compliant. So for the site development plan requirements, for this preliminary application, the site plan shows existing conditions. It's not really necessary, but since it's a vacant lot, the requirements for the site plan are included that include lot dimensions and easements, and these things will be finalized in the major subdivision application as well. No signage is proposed, and the letter of intent notes that there's not going to be any signage, but if there is any in the future, it'll have to comply with our sign ordinance. Exterior lighting shown around the buildings and at the parking lot are compliant and non-compliant. The building mounted lights are compliant with our dark skies ordinance with the height and shielding that's proposed. The freestanding parking lot lights are not compliant since the pole height exceeds our 15-foot limit with 16 feet and doesn't appear to be shielded to limit light emitted to 45 degrees. So this is something that would have to be corrected in the final design. For mailboxes, the applicant states that the residents will get their mail delivered to their homes, and those mailboxes have to be accessible by the postal service. No bike racks are shown for the site, but they are not required. The total square footage, the proposed uses, elevations, height from final grade, and exterior materials and colors are shown on the elevations. For the grading and drainage plan, there is a retention pond on the northwest portion of the property, which also provides landscaping, and our engineer has reviewed that and has noted corrections that need to be made, and so the final site development plan would need to correct those corrections. For roadway standards, there's no proposed roads through the site, and access to the site will be through Willow Road on the south side. A traffic impact study is not required, and the sidewalk and curb and gutter is included and acceptable since this continues the improvements along 4th Street that connect the sidewalks within the development to the existing 4th Street sidewalks. For parking requirements, the minimum number of off-street parking spaces for a residential development is actually 1 parking space per dwelling unit. And so this is already met with the single car garages that are in each building. In addition to that, the applicant is proposing providing another 11 parking spaces to provide additional parking for guests and also 2-car households. The parking lot has an access aisle of about 25 feet, which is compliant with our 24-foot minimum. And no handicap parking is shown on the site plan, but handicap parking is not required since the structures are residential. Our off-street parking requirements, we typically require that the spaces are 9 feet by 20 feet. And this can be reduced to 18 feet instead of 20 feet in length when there's a 2-foot overhang with a parking bumper to allow cars to park over that bumper. The parking bumpers will have to be added to the 18-foot long spaces in order to comply. And the width of the proposed spaces is less than our normal 9-foot requirement. The widths of the spaces range from 8 feet to 8.5 feet. And our code doesn't contemplate these smaller dimensions for parking spaces. It doesn't contemplate compact spaces. And it doesn't contemplate 9 or less than 9-foot spaces, even though 8.5 feet is also relatively typical. And so because the applicant intends to provide this additional parking for the residences and wants to provide as much additional parking as possible within those space constraints, they're proposing smaller parking spaces with those widths. And so if we were to apply our typical 9-foot requirement, it would reduce the available spaces within the lot from 11 spaces to 9. And so in this case, staff are proposing an alternate parking plan would apply to provide for compact parking spaces that don't meet our standard dimensions. We can allow an alternative parking plan provided that a nuisance won't be created, and a nuisance won't be created since the spaces are well within the interior of the property and are primarily accessible to the residents. And 8.5 foot wide parking spaces accommodate most vehicle sizes, and 8 feet is a typical compact size, and actually it could go even smaller than that. And so with that, the staff do recommend approving that site plan with the parking spaces with those 8-foot and 8.5-foot wide spaces. A loading and docking area is not shown, but since this property is going to be residential, that's not required. Our gravel specifications are also not shown, but they will have to be required in the final site plan. For trash receptacles, the dumpsters must be accessible by waste management, and the dumpsters are shown to be enclosed on a concrete pad and gated, which meet our specifications. The landscaping, 20% of the unbuilt area is required to be landscaped since this lot is a corner lot. And this is exceeded with 26% of the unbuilt area landscaped. The landscape includes, or the 26% does include landscaping that's within the public right of way, and I'll get into that in just a second about the relationship between the public amenities, public right of way, and the property. For the utilities, the application includes a utility plan and a statement confirming water and sewer availability, and a letter from the fire department that confirms compliance with their requirements, and no new fire hydrants are required. For lighting, as I mentioned, the freestanding lights are not compliant, but the building mounted lights are, and the freestanding lights will have to be changed to be compliant with the dark skies ordinance. The Fire One plan must be approved by Bernalillo County Fire Department, as well as meet all other Bernalillo County Fire Department requirements. And I also just want to quickly touch on the relationship with our public right of way, since this is on a section of 4th Street where there already is existing sidewalk. We have a section of our code, section 9.2.4U, that requires 7 feet of right of way to be dedicated to the village for future improvements. Since there already are improvements in that right of way, we are waiving this requirement. Since the applicant proposes additional improvements that do extend into the right of way, such as the landscaping and sidewalk connections to our existing sidewalk, the village intends to accept those improvements within our right of way. And the applicant will have to install those according to City of Albuquerque sidewalk standards, and post the installation and acceptance by the village. Those improvements will have to be dedicated to the village. And then improvements that aren't within the right of way will still remain the responsibility of the property owners. So with that, the Planning and Zoning Department recommends the commission forward to the Board of Trustees a recommendation to approve the residential site development plan for development in the BC zone in the 4th Street character area with the following conditions and findings. Condition 1, before obtaining building permits, the property must be subdivided according to the major subdivision process and filed with Bernalillo County. Condition 2, the final submittal includes location of the trash receptacles accessible to waste management. Condition 3, the NPDES grading and drainage plan must be corrected per the village designated engineer's review for approval of the final site development plan. And an addendum to that is that section 9.2.254L showing compliance with our gravel private way specifications must be included. Condition 4, the Fire One plan must be approved by Bernalillo County Fire Department. Condition 5, the applicant may install improvements in the public right of way as shown on the plans, with an addendum that the sidewalks shall abide by the City of Albuquerque standards, and post installation and village acceptance of improvements will be dedicated to the village of Los Ranchos. Condition 6, that mailboxes must be accessible to the United States Postal Service. Condition 7, that landscaping shall be installed according to the landscaping plan within 1 growing season after issuance of certificates of occupancy and compliance. Condition 8, any future signage must comply with the sign ordinance and sign permits must be obtained. Condition 9, exterior lighting must comply with the dark skies ordinance. Condition 10, the final site development plan must meet Bernalillo County Fire Department requirements. Condition 11, construction shall meet all current village, county, and state codes. Condition 12, the final site development plan must be executed by the applicant with the findings that this application is in compliance with our master plan in the village form and residential development sections. The proposed development meets the requirements of the VC zone, but this approval also would include, and this recommendation would include an alternate parking plan for the parking spaces 18 feet long with buffers and widths ranging from 8 feet to 8.5 feet. This also would include approximately 16% of facade clear glass glazing on 4th Street, and for the north side setback to be greater than 6 feet. And public notice requirements have been met. With that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director Justice. Are there any questions from the commission for the director? Yes, Commissioner Barrow.
Tiffany, nowhere here have I seen anything about the fact that it used to be a gas station. Gas stations have storage tanks. in as much as this, all we're supposed to do is agree or not agree to put it forward to the commissioners. However, there's nothing stated in one way or another whether environmental pollution from the gas station storage tanks have been addressed.
Yes, Commissioner Barrow, commissioners, that is something that the applicant can address in their presentation, and that'd be a great question for the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commission? I do have one for Director Justice. So it sounds like, you know, there will be some altering of the code really to allow for the setback to the north, the glazing, possibly the parking through the instrument of an alternative parking plan. Is there, I mean, will there be a variance process for these, or will our recommendation to the Board of Trustees and their approval kind of seal that in?
So Commissioner Seavey, commissioners, the latter, essentially, if you all approve the site development plan, this would include the site development plan with these variations to our code. And the primary distinction between our variance process and these requirements is that in order to meet some of our requirements, some of our other requirements have to be waived in some ways. And then also the alternative parking plan is something that we can contemplate that is separate from the variance process. Similarly, we can contemplate an alternative landscaping plan that meets certain conditions that doesn't require a variance. And Attorney Winter can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Homan, I imagine I thought I saw a hand raised there for a minute.
You did. I just had a quick question, Mr. Chairman, regarding the utilities and the utility easement. I'm assuming that is what I am seeing on, and I can't tell you what page of whatever this is. Must be 39 of 68. I just want to make sure, is the electricity going to be overhead, and is it going to have natural gas? I'm concerned with future repair, that there's plenty of space for those repairs being done, and that the buildings themselves are not on top of the utility area.
Yes, so Commissioner Holman, commissioners, so as to which utilities and whether or not the lines will be buried, that's a good question for the applicant. However, the village can require that in all new development, utilities be buried, and that is something that we can require and prohibit approval of if the lines are proposed to be overhead. And so in this case, especially considering the fire truck access width, there really is no practical reason to have these lines be overhead. So I imagine they will be buried, but we can also require them to be buried.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from the commission at this point? Okay, hearing none, is the applicant present?
Stand by.
Good evening. Are you able to connect and hear us?
I am able to connect. I don't know why the computer was moving a little bit slow, but I'm connected and I can hear you, yes.
Excellent. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. My name is Chris Pacheco. The address is 5905 El Prado Northwest, Los Ranchos, New Mexico, 87107.
Thank you. Attorney Winter, would you please swear in Mr. Pacheco?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Pacheco, would you like to speak about your application?
Well, there was two questions that were brought up. One was the utilities, and that can be found on page Charlie 301 of the packet, which is the site utility plan. But to answer Commissioner Holman's questions, yes, utilities will be buried. And there's, if you look at that, it shows the wet utilities, the dry utilities, the electricity, and the gas. And there's a meter bank, which would be the southwest corner of the property for the gas meters. And then that's for the meters on the western side of the property. And then there's a meter bank on the south. Well, no, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, there's a meter bank on the southeast and the southwest corners of the property for the houses on both the east and west side of the property. In terms of a gas station, I believe it was you that called me today, Commissioner Barrow.
No, I didn't call you, but I'm listening for the answer.
Okay, well, someone did call me, and I don't remember who it was. So yes, the site was a gas station at one time. And there were tanks on there at one time. The tanks were removed in January 1995. 4 monitoring wells were installed January 1995. There is an open case with New Mexico Energy Department Petroleum Storage Tank Bureau. There is a work plan in place, and the work plan is being executed by a company called Animus Environmental Services. The responsible party for that remains the Gas Man LLC. They remain the responsible party. The last action taken on the work plan was in August of 2018. The wells were tested. Three or four of the monitoring wells are clear. There remains one well to be clear. That's well number 3. Well number 3 had levels slightly above the state requirement for dissolved manganese. The state requirement is 0.2, and this was 0.4, slightly above that, although the levels of dissolved manganese have been dropping steadily since 1995. We anticipate when the work plan is finished, which I'm hoping is going to be soon. I spoke to the state New Mexico Environmental Department today, in fact. We're hoping it's going to be soon, which will require one more test into the wells. We should get a letter of no further action on that. That's about as concise as I can make the report on the gas stations.
And may I ask, you're not going to begin building until after that's cleared, is that correct?
Well, the answer is if we left the monitoring wells on there, we could build. I doubt I could get financing without getting a letter of no further action. So for all practical purposes, no, we won't begin building until we get an NFA.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Any further questions from the commission right now? Okay, well, hearing none, is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of the application?
I am going to lower the hands for a minute. And then if you would like to speak in favor of the application, would you please re-raise your hand? Again, if you would like to speak in favor of the application, could you raise your hand? There are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Kiko. And conversely, is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition to the application?
I have a hand raised and I will be letting Ms. Barros in.
No, I didn't raise the hand.
Good evening, Ms. Varos. Can you hear us?
Ms. Faros, it doesn't look like you have audio connected right now. The chair commissioners, I'm going to, there we go. Ms. Faros, are you able to connect your audio? Chair commissioners, I'm going to remove Ms. Faros and try to re-add her. Stand by.
Sure. Thank you, Kiko.
Ms. Faros, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Could you hear me now? I just always have problems here with my Zoom connections. Could you hear me?
We can hear you, Ms. Varos. Would you please state your full name and address for the record?
Thank you. Camille Varos, 427 El Paraíso Road, Northwest Los Ranchos, New Mexico.
Attorney
I-
Winter, excuse me, Ms. Varos. Attorney Winter, would you please swear in Ms. Varos?
Ms. Varos, can you please raise your right hand? Do you
Yes.
swear- Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Please go ahead,
Thank
Ms. Varos. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Pacheco, could there be some clarification on, I've reviewed the file and you're noted as a contractor, not the applicant, because the applicant was that, and I can't pronounce that name. So are you speaking in behalf of the application?
Well, I mean, the applicant is Nijmegen Plaza LLC, which is the property. The contractor is Pluma Construction Systems, Inc., which is a construction company that I own.
Okay,
Ms. Varos, please continue with your
I
comment.
will,
and
but I
there will be
wanted to
excuse me.
clarify that.
There will be
um,
opportunity for the applicant to respond, but just please, just make your statement.
Yes, well, there's some questions and also statements. So on a email from Mr. Pacheco to Tiffany on the February 17th, he stated that he's working with extremely limited space. And I'd like to note that because when we're talking about, 12 townhouses and three stories, and there's considerations for waste management, because on the Willow Street side, which is perpendicular, they'd want to go inside to get to the garbage bins. So is that a consideration? Have you heard back from Waste Management on that?
Again, Ms. Varos, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to your comment after the comment period.
So, well, I made comments and questions. So, who am I speaking with now then?
You have
So
30
Ms.
more
Vados, if you could just say all your questions and all your comments all at once, then the applicant will have the opportunity to respond to all of them at once.
Okay, in terms of, well, now I'm confused because sometimes there's comments, sometimes there's questions. And my biggest question is on the soil analysis of the manganese, which is a chemical. And even though the receptacles were taken out, those storage cisterns could disintegrate and migrate. And I want to make sure that before any approval or acceptance of this application, that we're going to be assured that there's no contamination in the soil, which could lead to water contamination, and those are toxic. So, and the last soil, from what Mr. Pacheco said, because Mr. Pacheco, I did speak with you this afternoon, and I did a little bit of research and called the county on this. So there is a,
Ms. Varos, your 3 minutes is up.
that's fine. You know, this is a big, huge project. And it, you know, if there's no one else talking or making comments, this has to be done right. This is, you know, before any construction or approvals, there has to be some baseline work. And soil analysis is huge. And water contamination possibility is huge. We have neighborhoods around there. And people are going to be living there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Faros. Kiko, it looks like we have another hand raised to speak in opposition.
Stand by.
Good evening. Are you able to hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Would you please state your full name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Loretta Chavez Smith. I have some concerns
Ms. Smith,
about,
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
I'm
but
sorry,
could you
it's
please provide
536.
your address?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 536 Chavez Road, Northwest Los Ranchos, 87107.
Thank
Ms.
you. Attorney Winter, would you please swear in Ms. Smith?
Ms. Smith, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Please go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Thank you very much. In opposition to this, along with what Camille Varos has specified, we need to have those answers for our environment. Okay. Unfortunately, VC zoning is not very clear. I don't understand why the relevant code are we allowing 24 units on a half an acre when the village code language states 24 dwellings per acre, gross acre. That's something to really consider on a half an acre to put 24 dwellings. And I think that's something that needs to be really seriously considered. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. Kiko, are you aware of anyone else who's wishing to speak?
There are currently no hands raised, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pacheco, would you like to respond to any of these comments and or questions?
Sure. And let's go back to the storage tanks. First of all, I can tell you, and I have learned a lot because I was really ignorant as to the process. But the process with the underground storage tanks is a process that's really been run in parallel to us ever buying the property or us owning the property. It is an open case with the New Mexico Environment Department. So it is something that's going to get, well, it's been remediated. The property was remediated when the tanks were pulled in 1995. The monitoring wells were put in to understand when the water levels or when the chemical levels drop. With that being said, whether we build on that property or not, what's in the ground is in the ground. And the prior owner is responsible for that. I am working very hard to get that cleared up and get a letter of no further action so that it is no longer a concern. But I do want to stress that whether that property is developed or not, that doesn't change what's in the ground. And we're not responsible for what's in the ground. The prior owner is responsible for what's in the ground. Now, like I told Ms. Faros today, I'm working with the State Environment Department, and they've actually been extremely cooperative. However, they're also extremely backlogged because of COVID, and they didn't get a chance to do a lot of work during COVID. So where it stands right now, I talked to Ms. Lorena Gorger with the New Mexico Environmental Department, and she's with the Petroleum Storage Tank Bureau. She is going to work to expedite this so that Animas Environmental can finish the work plan, get the final readings, and we can get a letter of no further action. That's really all I can say to that. I'm tracking it, I'm pushing it, I'm doing everything I can to get it done. The only thing I want to point out is whether that we built on that property or not, that's not going to change anything that's in the ground. In terms of the zoning for VC, as Director Justice knows and all the commissioners know, is 24 units per acre. And I think we can address that real quick. We're putting 12 units on a half acre. So I mean, we meet that zoning requirement. I'm not too sure there were any other questions that need to be addressed. If I missed something, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Are there any further comments at this point from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Christensen.
Mr. Pacheco, may I just ask you a question? I'm looking at, it's in our packet, it's page 41 of 68, and it's the representation of what the units are going to look like. In our packet, it's 41 of 68. Sorry, I know it's numbered different ways, but.
Is it the elevations?
Does that?
Yeah, those are the elevations.
Okay. And so these are how the buildings are going to look. And I noticed that they talk about the stucco color and things like that. So this is how what they're going to look like.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. That was my question.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the commission? Okay, hearing none. I'm now going to close the floor for comments. And I will ask again of the commission, now that the floor is closed, is there any discussion on the application prior to a motion? Yes, Commissioner Christensen, please.
I just have a question. When I was looking at this design, and I had gone through the master plan, and I was looking at the village form section, and so on. I have various pages. Page 9 talks about the village form focuses on physical development and redevelopment that affects the overall visual look and atmosphere of the village. And I'm not saying that I'm against the apartments or anything like that, but as I read over and over through the master plan, it talks about allowing architectural diversity while promoting a universal unifying style. And when I'm going to be honest with you, when I look at these, I don't think of the village when I look at these. This looks to me like an urban downtown feel of places I've been in, Denver and other places. I don't think it gives the character of the village. And that's just my comment. I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Being zoned village center, it is a, probably the highest density residential in the village. But I do understand your comment as well. I'm personally inclined to recommend this for approval to the Board of Trustees, but I did want to bring up an additional condition that we may want to consider adding. And it sounds like the applicant is completely on top of this, but if we had it in writing that a no further action statement on that work order would need to be in place in order to proceed. I don't know if other commissioners have thoughts on that.
I agree with you, Drew. I made a note that a clean report on the measuring wells with the NFA sign off.
Okay, great.
Clean. And I'm saying, Drew, I want to get back. I'm not saying I'm opposing high density in the village. It's just tying the character, the buildings with what the village looks like. And you can do that.
Absolutely. Commissioner Homan?
I would agree, as far as the character of the village and the visual appeal, if you will, of this development is out of character with the village. It is closer to some things. Not only do we see downtown Albuquerque, but further down 4th Street, going toward downtown Albuquerque. But one of the things we have to realize that our VC zone, because of the height that we're allowing in the VC zone, this is what we're going to start seeing. And we have said in the master plan that we want to have some development that's higher density, that will allow younger families, less expensive homes to be built. And this is the first step that direction. And of course, the first step is usually the hardest. So this may be more in line with what we'll see actually there in the center. Not to say that there isn't other options that are out there, but certainly this is a representation that qualifies in all that area. I too am concerned about the final approval of the environmental study on those wells. Certainly, I don't think we should allow any kind of building to go forward until that clean bill of health for the environment in this area has been achieved. Because certainly once the paving and the buildings are there, how are you going to do further remediation?
Thank you. Commissioner Christensen.
And you guys, I'm sorry. I want you to understand, I'm not against high density. I'm not against the height of the building. What I'm saying is how the building looks, is what I'm saying. Not the height, but the design of the building with the glass and all that. I think a while ago we had for townhouses further down on 4th Street, and they were stuccoed and they looked very much in the style of the village with the stucco and the Southwest design. Again, I am not against high density and changing and everything's within the height, but just the style of what the building looks like. I want to make that clear because I think people keep thinking that I'm saying I'm against high density, and that I'm not at all.
Yeah, totally understood. It's more the articulation of the facade and the choices that were made.
Yeah,
Yes.
the aesthetic.
Commissioner Michelson, I see a hand raised.
Yes, the other structures in the village that are as tall as the ones that are being talked here are the apartments off of 4th Street down near Paseo. So we already have that height in the village. I'm not going to comment on the beauty or the ugliness of it, but that's already there. And this height is within the village center requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further comments at this point? Okay, is there a motion?
Okay, I move we approve the recommendation of Commissioner Justice with the proviso that the developer, Mr. Pacheco, show a letter of compliance with any removal of any pollution from the site. Would somebody
Commissioner-
like to restate that for me?
Commissioner Barrow, if I may, would you be willing to include the other conditions as included in the packet?
Oh, yes, yeah, the whole packet. But I do like to have a letter of compliance with environmental.
Second,
Okay, Commissioner Barrow has moved to forward to the Board of Trustees a recommendation to approve the site development plan with the conditions as listed, as well as an additional condition such that a no further action letter would be required at the termination of the work plan involved with the remediation of the site. And Commissioner Michelson has seconded the motion. We'll now move on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes,
Commissioner Homan.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Let the record show that the public hearing item 4A, the request by Nemagen Plaza Limited Liability Corporation for a preliminary review and recommendation to the Board of Trustees of a residential site development plan for a development is formally closed. We will now move on to item 5, which is old business. Item A is discussion on applicant deferrals. Director Justice, do you have an update on the applicant deferrals for discussion?
Yes, so Commissioner CV, Commissioners, in your packet, you'll see a draft resolution that goes over applicants requesting deferrals. And so for some context, this was brought up at, I believe, the December Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, where there's just questions about how often can an applicant defer, when can an applicant defer, and I guess just the best means to do that. And so I worked with the village attorney to draft a potential resolution that addresses this. And this is requests for the deferral that just come from the applicant. This is different from a withdrawal that just occurred. This is somebody who's requesting to not be on the agenda. However, due to our public notice requirements, they've already been noticed as being on the agenda. And so just going through the resolution, there's two main parts. And actually, sorry, let me jump back. The reason for this is actually based on our long timeline for applicants and our public notice requirements before a meeting. And so a typical timeline for an applicant is at the month before the meeting. They have to submit their application, and which something that has recently changed is I've added to the application forms that all required documents and supplemental documents are included in the complete application, and otherwise it's going to be considered incomplete and won't be scheduled on the agenda. So just trying to nip incomplete applications in the bud. But so once they submit their application, there's actually 3 weeks. That's actually 3 weeks ahead of the meeting where we do our public notice. So there's a full 15-day comment period before the packet goes out, which is 2 Fridays before the planning and zoning meeting. So there is a long period of public comment available and public notice available. So of course, within that time frame, circumstances could change and the applicant could request to defer their application. So there's 2 sections, one where basically it's before the agenda and the packet is published 2 Fridays before the meeting, and then one that's after, but still before the meeting. So the first is that the deferral request has to be in writing, and the director would then have the planning and zoning director would have the discretion to grant or deny the request for the deferral. It would essentially be a judgment call, just based on the circumstances surrounding their request. Is this outside of their control? Is this something that they should have prepared for? That kind of thing. And there's 2 options. The director can either approve or deny that deferral request. If the director approves that, then it won't be on the agenda. It will be similar to tonight, where I said during the approval of the agenda that this application is no longer on the agenda. It won't be on the agenda, and anybody who got the public notice for that would be notified at that time that it's no longer on the agenda. If the director denies that request, then it would still be on the agenda, and it's up to the commission to decide whether or not they'd like to defer the application at that meeting or hear the application. And if either the applicant or another party feels aggrieved by the decision to defer, that can be contemplated in their appeal of a final commission decision. So deferral itself would not be an appealed decision. The other, of course, is that after the packet has already been published and after the agenda has been posted, but still before the meeting, whether or not they can defer their application. And the next one contemplates that the chair of the commission would have the discretion and the exact same discretion as the director, where, depending on the circumstances, perhaps allow their deferral. And then we would just mention that change to the agenda at the meeting. Or if the chair denies that request, then it is again before the commission for the commission to decide that deferral. And so this is a draft on how we would address this. I stand for any questions, and I'm happy to discuss anything that might have been missed from this that still needs to be addressed.
Sure. Is there any discussion from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Homan.
Tiffany, I would ask for just clarification. If it came down to a meeting and the commission itself asked for a deferral, Lord knows what reason, the issue of compensation for that publication and such, does that get waived, or how in the world would that be assigned?
So Commissioner Holman, commissioners, good question. When the commission decides to do anything like defer an application, the village will pay the publication cost for the next meeting. So when the commission decides to defer an application, we will incur the cost of the public notice.
Thank you for clarifying.
Director Justice, just thinking of the mechanics of this, and maybe I have the language wrong, but wouldn't an applicant, if they were not able to defer their item, could they just withdraw their application and come back, in another month? And does that address this, or what are your thoughts on that?
So Commissioner Seavey, commissioners, this doesn't address withdrawals. Our practice for withdrawals is that if an applicant withdraws their application, we get that in writing. And depending on when that withdrawal happens, we will do public notice, or we mentioned that there's a change to the agenda at the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commission? Director Justice, this draft language, at what point would this be adopted? And we're not taking action tonight, it appears.
No, so this, we would still want to shore up any concerns that the commission has. If there's anything missing from this, please reach out to me within the next week or two. You're welcome to call or email me if there's something that you think needs to be addressed with this resolution, so we can shore it up and have it ready potentially for adoption at next month's meeting.
Great. Well, that sounds good. Commissioners, please review this a little bit more thoroughly and send Director Justice any comments you might have. With that, if there's no further comments, we'll move on to item 6, which is new business. Item 6A is adoption of resolutions for 2022. Item 6A1 is adoption of resolution 2022-1, Planning and Zoning Open Meetings Act. Is there any discussion from the commission? Okay, well, hearing none, is there a motion? Yes, Commissioner Homan.
I would move approval of resolution number 2022-1-P&Z.
Second.
Commissioner Michelson, Thank you. All right, Commissioner Homan has moved to approve Resolution 2022-1, Planning and Zoning, and Commissioner Michelson has seconded the motion. We'll move on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
Yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes,
Commissioner Homan.
Yes,
The motion carries unanimously. Item 6A2 is adoption of resolution 2022-2, planning and zoning rules for transaction of business. Is there any discussion from the commission? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion?
I move adoption of regulation 2222-2, if I got the numbers right.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Michelson has moved to approve resolution 2022-2, planning and zoning, and Commissioner Smith has seconded the motion. Beginning with a roll call vote, we'll start with Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
Yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
yes,
Commissioner Homan.
yes,
All right, the motion carries unanimously. Item 3 is adoption of resolution 2022-3, planning and zoning, closed sessions. Is there any discussion from the commission? Okay, well, hearing none, is there a motion? Commissioner Homan,
I'll move approval of resolution number 2022-3 P and Z.
I'll second.
Commissioner Homan has moved to adopt resolution 2022-3 P and Z, and Commissioner Barrow has seconded the motion. We'll go on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes,
Commissioner Homan.
Yes,
All right, the motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to item B, which is election of officers for 2022. It'll be nominations for chair, vice chair, and secretary. For chair nominations, it's now time to elect our officers for the year. Are there any nominations for chair? Yes, sir.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Seavey for chair.
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Michelson has moved to nominate Commissioner Seavey for chair, and Commissioner Homan has seconded the motion. We'll now move on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
Yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
yes,
Commissioner Homan.
Yes,
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to nominations for vice chair. I move to nominate Commissioner Gay for vice chair.
I second.
Okay, Commissioner Seavey has moved to nominate Commissioner Gay for vice chair, and Commissioner Christensen has seconded the motion. Moving on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey? Yes, sorry, excuse me. Commissioner Michelson,
yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
yes,
and Commissioner Homan.
yes,
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Item 6BC is secretary. Are there any nominations for secretary? I move to nominate Commissioner Christensen for secretary.
I'll second that.
Okay. Commissioner Seavey has moved to nominate Commissioner Christensen for secretary, and Commissioner Smith has seconded the motion. Moving on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Seavey, yes. Commissioner Michelson,
Yes,
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrow,
Yes,
Commissioner Homan.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 7, which is reports, Planning Department report. Director Justice, may we please have the Planning Department report?
Yes, Commissioners, this is a combined report for February and March. Essentially, it's business as usual for the Planning and Zoning Department. I will say I have a correction for my written report regarding COVID-19 and whether or not the Planning and Zoning Commission will be back in person. So that is my misunderstanding of the indoor mask mandate versus the public health order. I assumed that once the public health, the indoor mask mandate was over, that equated to the public health order, but that is not the case. So because of that, until the public health order is rescinded, we are intending to remain online. Similar to other communities, this is similar to other communities, New Mexico, such as the city of Albuquerque, Santa Fe. Rio Rancho provides hybrid meetings, but our facility is unable to offer hybrid meetings at this time. So because of that, we're erring on the side of caution and will remain online. That is just a correction that I have. And then also just one other potential point of interest. I presented a conservation development ordinance to the Board of Trustees in February for advertisement, and it is on the March agenda for adoption. This is, well, potential adoption at this point. This is a pilot project ordinance for conservation development. And this is something that was contemplated in the master plan and basically just following through on an action that was suggested there. In addition, at the February meeting, the board approved an ordinance that amends the parcel permit requirement for contractors. We formally required both contractors and realtors to get a parcel permit. You've probably seen those yellow sign riders, usually on realtor signs and less so with contractor signs. We have changed that requirement to now just say that contractors need an annual business license, because the way that it had worked before, we were charging the same amount as the annual business license, just multiple times. So if you did multiple jobs in Los Ranchos, you were getting the equivalent of multiple business licenses. So this ends up making things easier for contractors. This is equivalent to what most jurisdictions do with contractors. And instead, we're going to be requiring that they post a zone review permit on their property. And so then we will still be issuing something that notifies that this property has gotten a permit through Los Ranchos. I want to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director Justice. Any questions on the report? Okay, we'll now move on to item 8, which is Commissioners' informal discussion. Are there any reports or information that any of the commissioners would like to share? I'll kick it off and just say welcome back to the commission, Commissioner Homan. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
There's no further discussion. We'll move on to item 9, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move for adjournment.
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Homan has moved to adjourn. Commissioner Christensen has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? No. All in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Meeting for March 8th, 2022 is adjourned at 8:14 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.